She thought stealing my husband would ruin me. I've always believed that when betrayal hits, it never starts with thunder. It begins in silence, in the creak of a familiar floorboard, in the way someone's voice tightens at the wrong moment, or in a glance that lingers just a second too long. At first, I thought I was imagining things. You tell yourself it's nothing, that you're just tired, paranoid, maybe hormonal, that the people you love would never gut you open with a smile on their face. But I was wrong. 3 years ago, I lived in a world I now realize was staged like a play. Every line rehearsed, every gesture practiced. I lived in a sunny 2-story house just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, with my husband, Daniel. On paper, we were the couple people envied. He was tall, smooth-talking, with an easy charm that made waitresses laugh and church ladies blush. I worked in corporate finance, quietly successful, more substance than sparkle. Together we were balance. And then there was her, my cousin, Lena. Lena had always been the wild card in the family, the kind of girl who wore danger like perfume. She had this way of inserting herself into other people's lives, like water seeping into cracks. People let her in because she was exciting, because she smiled like she knew secrets. When Lena came to stay with us, just for a while, after a rough breakup, I didn't question it. Family is family. She needed a place to stay. Daniel even offered to drive her in from Asheville. He said it like it was no big deal, just helping out. It didn't occur to me, not then, that his hands lingered a little too long on her luggage, that when she stepped out of the car and flashed her white blonde hair in the sun, Daniel's jaw clenched ever so slightly before he smiled. I brushed it off. I always brushed it off. By the 3rd week, I noticed small things going missing, not objects, just attention. Conversations that ended when I walked in, inside jokes I wasn't part of. Daniel and Lena suddenly having errands at the same time. One night I came home late and found them in the kitchen, laughing over wine I hadn't opened. Lena looked up at me, eyes wide like a girl caught dancing barefoot in a thunderstorm. Daniel just said, "Hey babe," like nothing was off. My name is Tessa Ward. I'm 34 years old. And I used to be the kind of woman who avoided conflict, who kept the peace, who smiled through discomfort, because that's what good women do. But something changed that night in the kitchen. It wasn't what I saw, it was what I felt. A hollow sort of echo in my gut, like I was already being erased. The next morning I woke up before either of them. I stood in the hallway, watching the 2 closed doors, mine and the guest room, across the hall, and I realized I didn't know who was sleeping where anymore. The suspense wasn't in what I knew, it was in what I almost knew. That moment, that awful in-between space where your world still looks intact, but you can feel the cracks spreading under your feet. I went to work that morning and stared at spreadsheets I didn't understand anymore. And somewhere, buried under shock, something inside me whispered, "Watch, don't speak, just watch." Because I wasn't wrong, something was happening, and I wasn't going to be the victim. The truth didn't arrive with a bang. It came in fragments, out-of-place details that began to stick like splinters under my skin. First, it was Daniel's cologne, Tom Ford. I'd bought it for him the year we got married. One day, I smelled it on Lena's scarf. She claimed she accidentally used it, thinking it was room spray. I forced a laugh, but something in me jolted awake. Then came the locked phone. Daniel had never been the secretive type, but suddenly, his phone lived face down on the nightstand. Notifications silenced, A new passcode. When I asked, he brushed me off. Just updated the OS, he said, lips twitching into that half-smile he used when he thought I was being silly. I stopped asking. I started watching. Lena began wearing more makeup around the house. Nothing drastic, just subtle shifts. Lip gloss in the morning, curled lashes in the kitchen. I'd catch her in the mirror, adjusting herself like she was being watched. Sometimes she'd offer to help Daniel with things, carry groceries, sort through mail, even join him on his early runs. She never used to run. It was the little things, always the little things. One night, I told Daniel I had a client dinner and left in a sleek black dress, heels clicking confidently down our porch steps. But I didn't go far. I parked 3 blocks away, killed the engine, and waited. An hour later, a light flicked on in our living room. 2 silhouettes moved behind the curtains. His tall frame, her slight one. I stared at that glowing window like it was a television screen I couldn't turn off. They weren't touching. But the space between them was charged. I felt it in my teeth. I left the car, heart slamming against my ribs, and walked home in the dark like I wasn't walking into my own house but a stranger's. I took the back door, quiet. The kitchen smelled like popcorn and white wine. I slipped my heels off and padded forward. I saw them. Lena's head rested lightly on Daniel's shoulder. He was holding the remote. Her laugh was soft, intimate. When I stepped into the room, they jumped apart like teenagers caught in the act. "Hey," Lena chirped, too loudly. "We were just watching that true crime doc you love." Daniel added, "We waited for you but figured you'd be late." He didn't meet my eyes. I didn't call them out. Not then. I just smiled. Of course. That night, I lay next to my husband and stared at the ceiling. His breathing slowed beside me, steady as always. I turned my head and watched his profile in the moonlight. This man, the one I had promised to grow old with, was lying to me. But I needed more than a gut feeling. So I became someone else, someone observant, careful, intentional. The next morning, I bought a burner phone. I downloaded a text monitoring app and connected it to his device. I told myself it was wrong. I also told myself I deserved to know. Within 3 days, I had everything. Their messages weren't romantic. They were cautious, slippery. They spoke in code at first, inside jokes, nicknames. But it didn't take long. One thread, dated 3 weeks earlier, broke me. "Lena, she's at yoga again. Come up." "Daniel, be there in 5. Leave the door unlocked." I dropped the phone. My vision blurred. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy, coordination, timing. They were using me. I sat there on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to my chest, and let the nausea wash over me. My ears rang. My fingers trembled. Every cell in my body screamed for me to throw something, to scream, to tear the house apart. But I didn't. I stayed very, very still, because some part of me, the part they underestimated, was already planning. If Lena wanted my husband, she could have him, but I was going to take everything else. The next morning, I made pancakes. Lena liked hers with blueberries. Daniel preferred chocolate chips. I plated both with a smile, so calm it made my cheeks ache. I sat at the table while they chatted about nothing, nodding, laughing lightly, sipping my coffee like I didn't know a single thing. But I knew everything. That was the first move. Control the silence. Let them believe they were still the clever ones. They expected confrontation, tears, accusations. What they didn't expect was my quiet compliance. I began gathering information, Not just texts, I dug deeper. Daniel and I shared several investment accounts, one of which I had opened when I was 27, long before we were married. He'd convinced me to move the funds under a joint umbrella to simplify things. Now I realized it wasn't about convenience, it was about positioning. But Daniel had underestimated me. What he didn't know was that I never removed my name as primary holder. What I didn't know until that moment was how many documents Selena had quietly signed on his behalf. On loan proposals, furniture purchases, even a joint gym membership she wasn't legally part of. Fraud, if you wanted to get technical. So I got technical. I called my lawyer. His name was Mr. Bramwell, and he was one of the few people who knew the full story. I didn't need a divorce lawyer, not yet. I needed a financial strategist, someone who could quietly and legally protect my assets before this circus turned into a courtroom. We moved quickly. First, we separated the accounts. I reclaimed everything under my name that was mine before marriage. Every dollar, every title. Lena had no idea that the very gym she flirted in, the car she occasionally borrowed, none of it was Daniel's to promise. I moved every shared utility bill into Daniel's name, cut myself from the household account, and opened a private one in a different bank, redirected my paycheck. Daniel was so distracted, so enthralled in the rush of sneaking around, that he didn't even notice. And Lena? She was busy trying on my life. One afternoon while they were out, I entered the guest room. Her room. It reeked of perfume and cheap satisfaction. I opened drawers carefully, like I was opening someone else's diary, and in one I found it, my gold bracelet. A gift from my late mother. I'd been looking for it for weeks. She hadn't even hidden it. I left it there. That was her mistake to carry. Later that week, I visited my grandparents. They were quiet, old-school folks with sharp instincts and long memories. I told them what had happened, not everything, but enough. Enough for their eyes to narrow. Enough for Grandma's lip to twitch in that quiet way she got when disappointed. My grandparents had always promised an inheritance to both Lena and me, but after that visit, they called their attorney and made an amendment. Everything would go to me. That was the second move, shift the future. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about reclaiming the dignity they tried to strip from me, inch by inch, whisper by whisper. I never confronted them. I wanted them to think they'd won, to relax into their betrayal, to build their little fantasy world inside my home, on my furniture, beside my husband. Because the deeper they sunk, the more brutal the fall. 2 weeks later, Daniel suggested we talk. We sat on the back patio, warm evening air brushing past us. He looked nervous, maybe even guilty, but not for the reason I wanted. He said, "You've been distant. Everything okay?" I looked at him long and slow. "Just focused on myself," I said. "That's all." He smiled, relieved. They always are when they think you're still in the dark. That night, I lay in bed beside him with one final thought curling in my chest like smoke. You didn't just betray me. You trained me, and I learned faster than you could ever imagine. The moment I knew it was time to strike was subtle. Daniel came home one evening with Lena behind him, laughing. She was barefoot, holding takeout, wearing my old sweatshirt, the one I used to wear when we first started dating. She looked at me like she belonged here, like I was the guest now. I offered them wine, they accepted. And that night, everything I'd orchestrated began to quietly click into place. 3 days later, I told Daniel I was flying to New York for a conference. It was a lie. I checked into a boutique hotel downtown and spent the weekend finalizing every legal transfer with Mr. Bramwell. The will from my grandparents was updated and notarized. My personal business investments, 2 startup stocks that had doubled in value, were placed into a trust with only my name on it. I submitted the paperwork for legal separation. And while they thought I was at a networking event, I was watching them. Because I had installed cameras, small ones, legally placed, covering common areas I had every right to monitor. I didn't want footage of anything explicit. I wanted evidence of Lena living here, using things that weren't hers, occupying a home she had no lease for. I wanted visual weight. I got it. She was parading around in his shirts, cooking breakfast in my kitchen, sitting in my spot on the couch while Daniel massaged her feet. It was all there. On Monday morning, I returned home early. Daniel wasn't expecting me. Neither was Lena. When I walked in, they froze, caught mid-conversation, wine glasses still in hand. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even acknowledge what they were doing. "Morning," I said. "Mind if I grab my laptop?" Daniel stammered something about how they were just watching a movie. Lena smiled too brightly. I nodded, picked up my laptop from the coffee table, and left without another word. They were rattled. Good. Now came the fall. First, I filed an official letter with the property board. The house was technically co-owned, but the land title, thanks to a little-known clause in my grandmother's will, was still in my family's name. That meant Lena couldn't legally reside there without a signed agreement. She received a formal eviction notice 2 days later. I wasn't home when she got it, but Daniel called me that night, furious. "You're kicking her out?" he barked. "Are you serious?" "She doesn't live here," I replied calmly. "She's been squatting. I'm simply correcting that." He cursed, threatened to call a lawyer. So I reminded him I already had one. I had weeks of footage. I had account withdrawals tied to her name. I had Lena's casual misuse of shared assets documented with timestamps. And, I added, I've already spoken to your employer about the joint financial misappropriation on our home equity line. Silence. He knew what that meant. His job in upper management depended on a clean record. I didn't need to press charges. Just the whiff of scandal would be enough to freeze his climb. Then I hung up. Lena was gone by Friday, not just from the house, but from Daniel's life. I don't know what exactly he said to her, but I imagine it wasn't kind. People like Daniel don't love, they use. And when the cost of using someone outweighs the benefit, they cut the rope. I watched him unravel in real time. He came home to an empty house. No Lena, no assets, and no access to the accounts he once shared with me. His card declined at the grocery store, his gym pass revoked, his work laptop restricted. I had stripped him legally and cleanly. He came to me once, 2 weeks later. Knocked on the door like a stranger. I opened it slowly. He looked tired, pale, smaller. "I made a mistake," he said. I tilted my head. "You made a plan," I corrected. "You just weren't smart enough to see mine." The divorce was filed quietly. There was no court battle. He knew he wouldn't win. My lawyer had crafted a perfect package: proof of infidelity, financial deceit, property violation. Daniel signed. He left with nothing but his clothes and a few boxes. The rest, I took it all, not out of spite, out of precision. They thought they could dismantle me without consequence. Instead, I rebuilt, without them. It happened at my cousin Mara's wedding. Lena showed up. She hadn't RSP'd. No one knew she was coming, but there she was, in a cream dress, no less, like she was daring the universe to notice her. The room went quiet when she walked in. People whispered. One aunt pulled her daughter closer. My grandmother's face hardened into stone. Lena floated around like nothing had changed, smiling at people who no longer smiled back. I stayed seated, sipping champagne, perfectly still. She avoided my eyes for most of the night, until just before the cake cutting when I caught her watching me from across the garden. Alone now, her bravado thin, she walked over, stood there for a moment, trying to summon that same charm that used to melt every room she entered. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said. I smiled. "You mean you hoped I wouldn't?" She laughed nervously. "Look, I know you probably hate me." I didn't answer. I thought he loved me," she said finally. "Daniel told me you were cold, controlling, that he was miserable." I looked at her then, fully. She was thinner, paler. Makeup trying to mask tired eyes. No sparkle left. "And you believed him," I said, my voice quiet. "I wanted to." I nodded. "You thought you were taking something from me," I said. "But all you did was inherit my trash." Lena blinked. Her mouth opened slightly as if to respond, but there was nothing left to say. She walked away, and I never saw her again. Daniel moved out of state, got a new job somewhere smaller, less impressive. He sent me a half-hearted email a few months later, something about closure, about how he missed who we used to be. I didn't reply. Some wounds don't bleed, they calcify, harden into memory. But they teach you. I learned that silence is powerful, that revenge doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be precise, elegant, strategic. And I learned that the most dangerous woman is the one who sees everything and says nothing. Until the end. 6 months after the divorce, I repainted the house. Not because I needed a change of color, but because every brushstroke felt like an erasure of what had been. I painted over the hallway where Lena used to hang her coat. Over the doorframe Daniel once leaned on while flirting with her. Over the kitchen wall where their laughter had once echoed. Layer by layer, I reclaimed my space. I donated the couch, replaced the bed, bought a new desk, and started working from home more. I let go of the things they touched, used, corrupted. Not out of rage, just release, like shedding an old skin. My mornings became quiet rituals. Coffee at sunrise, long walks before meetings, journals filled with thoughts I never used to make time for. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand the version of me that let it all happen without seeing it sooner. But I didn't shame her. I forgave her. She was loyal, trusting, software. She didn't deserve what happened, but she did learn from it. One evening, I sat in my backyard with a glass of wine and no one else around. The cicadas hummed in the trees. The air was warm, still. And I thought about everything I had lost, a marriage, a cousin, an entire illusion of safety. But I didn't feel empty. I felt clear, because when they took my trust, I found my boundaries. When they tried to break me, I rebuilt in silence. And when they thought they were walking away with everything, they had no idea I'd already taken it all back. With interest. If you've ever been betrayed and stayed silent, let them think they won, just like I did. Subscribe for more stories of calm revenge, quiet power, and justice served cold.